growing up, my parents went out of their way to teach my brother and I good manners, as many parents do for their children. And included in those lessons of good manners was this lesson: whenever you go and visit someone in their home, take off your shoes. So that's what we did. Whenever we visited anybody, we took off our shoes. And they did the same coming to our home. Obviously, we would do this in winter, but we would also do it in fall and spring and summer. It's just what you did. And like any child being taught by his parents, I thought this is what everybody did. It's a universal law that when you go and visit someone's home, you first of all take off your shoes. Well, one day, my world got rocked. Because we had guests, cousins actually, of my mom from the United States come to visit us. And so we were excited for them coming. And they arrived and we went out to greet them in the driveway. And then we said, come on in. And they came in, and you know what happened? They walked right into the house with their shoes on. Sat down in the living room, you know, dust and dirt everywhere. And I couldn't believe this. I looked at them and I thought, well, what's going on? So being precocious, I think I was probably 7 or 8 at the time, but in my cute, precocious way, I said to them, why do you still have your shoes on? We take off our shoes here. And they looked at me and said, well, we never take off our shoes. And I thought to myself, what an odd country. Nobody takes off their shoes in the United States. How strange. Of course, as I get older, I realize there's lots of people who don't take off their shoes, and maybe this isn't the universal law that I thought it was. And now that I'm an adult, usually I still take off my shoes, and on the occasion when people say, oh, don't worry about that, don't take off your shoes, and I listen to them, there's a voice in the back of my head saying, you're supposed to take off your shoes. I tell you that story because it came to my mind when I read the first reading today. Moses is on a mountain, and he is being a shepherd. He is living his life. And he comes across this bizarre sight, this bush that is on fire, but it is not being consumed. And if that wasn't strange enough, the bush now speaks to him. And the bush is God. It is God's way of presenting himself to Moses. And what is the first thing that God says to Moses? Take off your shoes. So you see, it is a universal law. I was right. God even thinks you should do that. That gesture of Moses, God says, take off your shoes because you are standing on holy ground. You are standing in God's presence. So Moses removing the sandals from his feet becomes kind of a symbolic gesture of how we are when we stand on holy ground. So I started to think, where is holy ground for us today? The first thing that comes to mind, of course, is this building. This church and others like it would be considered holy ground. God is present here in the Eucharist, at the Word, in one another. And we have all sorts of physical gestures that speak of acting in the presence of God. So we bless ourselves when we come in. We genuflect, we kneel, we bow. There's all sorts of things that we do that kind of give a physical demonstration of expressing we are on holy ground. Other religions do it too. In the Muslim religion, if you enter the mosque, you will see shoes piled up at the entrance of the mosque. They are on holy ground. Sometimes, I don't know if you ever noticed this before, but if you go to the movie theater, and you're walking along, and I've done this, and you might see somebody else, before they get into their seat, what do? They genuflect. And you think, they're Catholic. Maybe they're on holy ground. It happens. Where is holy ground today? You see, if we think it is just in the church, then we limit ourselves. Then it is easy to avoid God the rest of the week because God isn't everywhere else, He's just in church. And we miss the opportunities of discovering where God may be beyond church. Certainly, church is a kind of a mountaintop experience. In Scripture, the mountain is where you have a special encounter with God. The technical word for that is a theophany. And so Moses has this special encounter with God, just like we have a special encounter with God here. But if you keep reading Exodus, what happens? Moses doesn't leave God in the burning bush. As Moses leads his people out of slavery in Egypt and into that 40 year of wandering in the desert, as tradition would have it, God goes with the people. God travels. There's the Ark of the Covenant. There is this ongoing conversation between God and the people as they wander in the desert. So obviously, the holy ground is not just on the mountain. It extends through that long, painful, hot, dry, and dusty journey through the deserts to the Promised Land. So if holy ground is expanded beyond the mountain, where is holy ground for us? Do we think that holy ground is in other places besides church? Have you ever thought that your homes are holy ground? That your schools are holy ground? The basketball court or the hockey rink is holy ground? What about more controversial places? Are the street corners on 20th Street after nightfall holy ground? Is the floor of the Friendship Inn and the food bank holy ground? Is the new floor in the new mental health, the Dubé Mental Health Center at RUH, is that holy ground? Is the CWL Clothing Depot holy ground? When you are talking with a family member, or I am talking with a parishioner who suffers from schizophrenia, are we on holy ground? Scripture would say yes. Our tradition would say yes. God is present to all of us, always, in different ways. And so we are on holy ground. The question is, do we acknowledge it? The question is, do we symbolically take off our shoes where God is on holy ground? Everywhere God is holy ground. And we encounter one another there. I struggle with this, to be honest with you, as I was putting this homily together, because for me, I know what is comfortable ground. I know who the people are and where I am that I feel God is, and that makes me feel comfortable. Some of those places that I listed and said, are they holy ground? I would be uncomfortable there. And I had to wrap my mind around the idea that God is on holy ground and I am on God's ground there. But I am. In fact, I find that I ought to be taking off my shoes much more often, because holy ground is everywhere. It would seem to me that a faithful Christian, a faithful follower of Christ, is probably someone that maybe never wears shoes, because holy ground is everywhere. I want to leave you with the words of the poet Elizabeth Browning. She once said this. She said, "Earth is crammed with heaven, and every common bush is afire with the presence of God. But only those who have eyes to see it ever take off their shoes."